Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm Dave. This tutorial is part of a Node.js and Express for Beginners tutorial series. I'll put a link to the full playlist in the description below. Today, we'll learn about middleware in the Express.js framework. We're going to start out with the code repository from the last tutorial, but if you don't have it, you should be able to easily follow along without it. Or you can download or clone the starter source code from the link I'm providing in the description below. So what is middleware? It's really anything between the request and the response, so the route handlers we created in the last tutorial are really middleware too. And we can see one of those right here that I'll highlight on the page. We've got a route handler for the new page route, so you could consider this middleware. And of course, we covered different things you can do with these route handlers, including chaining them. As we see right here, I've got a route handler, a comma, and then a second handler, or we chain them in an array by creating three separate handlers here and then putting them in an array in the route right here. So just a little bit of a recap, but those are overall considered route handlers, even though they are essentially middleware. So what about creating some specific middleware, where there are three types of middleware? There's built-in middleware, there's custom middleware, and there's middleware from third parties. Of course, the custom middleware is what we create ourselves. So let's get started with the built-in middleware. I'm going to create some space right underneath the port definition, and I'm going to paste in some built-in middleware. And the first thing we should notice here is that it is app.use. And app.use is what we often use to apply middleware to all routes that are coming in. And of course, just like our HTTP methods, get, and of course we could use post, delete, put, and other methods as well. Just like those methods, this all works as a waterfall. So if we put app.use above our routes, then this will apply to all routes that come in. And you can see in here, we're calling express.url encoded. And then this receives an options object, there I can say it, and extended is set to false. And that's usually how you see it. You can look in the documentation if you want to dive deeper into that, but that is typically what you see. So what is this middleware for? Well, it's for handling URL encoded data. In other words, form data. So when that comes in the URL, then you can pull the data out as a parameter. So we need to add this middleware that is built into Express in order to get that data when form data is submitted. Now I'll add an additional layer of middleware, and this is for JSON, as you might expect. So not form data, but if JSON data is submitted, we need to be able to get those parameters or that data out of the submission, and we use this middleware to do it. So once again, app.use and then express.json, and now this is applied to all routes as it comes in. And finally, for the last piece of built-in middleware that we'll apply today, we're going to serve static files. And this is important because if you remember from the last tutorial, we were not yet applying CSS. We had a broken image in our new page, and files that should be available to the public were not available. And that's what this middleware does. It serves static files. So once again, we start with app.use, and then it's express.static, and we supply the path. And here I'm using path join, as we have many times before. We supply the directory name value, and then the public folder is what we're going to put all of those in. So when we save this, we now need to create a public folder. And inside this public folder, we need to drag our CSS folder, and we need to drag our image folder. And let's go ahead and create one more folder in here, and let's call this text. And then from our data folder, let's pull down the data.txt and put it inside the text folder. So now we have some files that we want readily available for the public, and Express will automatically route those files there because this is applied before our other routes. So it will search the public directory for the requests before it moves to these other routes. Let's go ahead and open a terminal window. From the terminal menu, you can choose New Terminal, or like me, Control and the backtick, and it opens up the terminal here. I've got a bash window, That should work just fine. I'm going to type npm run dev to start nodemon for our development server, and this should launch everything. And yes, we're already running on port 3500. Let's go to Chrome, and I've got a blank window open in Chrome, so we can type localhost 3500 was already there, and we get index, and it's already applying the CSS. So now let's go ahead and comment out the middleware. So we're not using those static files. And let's reload our index page and see what we get. Now there's no CSS applied. So it is absolutely finding those public files and applying them. However, we didn't really change the path in those files, and we should. Now I'll reload this, and we do see it's applied. But let's take a look at those files. Here's our index. And we were going up out of the views directory and then into the CSS directory, and that's not really there, so this is being a little forgiving. Let's just get rid of that, because we know this path is available to the public, of course, after the directory name there. So after the root of the URL, it should just be css/style.css, and we can double check that by going to Chrome, and from there we can just type /css/style.css. Sure enough, we pull up our CSS file in the browser, so it is available to the public. Let's go ahead and make these same changes on our new page.html. We can get rid of the .. for image, for the image directory and for the CSS directory, and save that. And also in our custom 404, we can get rid of the .. and save. Now all of those should be working fine, and they really were before, but this cleans it up. Now let's go back to the server.js, and let's consider adding some custom middleware that we write ourselves. Let's create a custom logger, and we want it before anything else, because we could put it, I guess, after the static files are served, but then we would not log the requests for the CSS or the images or anything like that. So if we put it at the very top, then we'll see the requests for everything as they come through. So we'll just call this custom middleware logger. And now we'll start with app.use. And inside of app.use, we'll put an anonymous function that gets a request, response, and since we're creating this, it needs to have next so we can move on. Notice the built-in middleware did not need next called. It's already built into that. But we need to call next inside of our custom middleware. So let's log to the console inside this logger, and we'll go ahead and log the request method. Here's the request.method, and then give a space, and we'll log the request.path as well. And now with both of those sent to the log, the only other thing we need to do is call next. So let's save this, and now let's go back to Chrome. And we can still see our console here. Let's request the page. And you can see we get the get request here, and there's the /, which is the home page. And we also see the request for the CSS file. While logging to the console is okay for our middleware logger, what we really would like to do is create a log file. And we've already created a log events function back when we were working just with Node. So we can go ahead and use this log events function in our logger as well. Let's create a new folder in the file tree and call this folder middleware. From here, let's pull the log events.js file straight into that directory. And now that we have log events there, we really don't need to change much, and we are already exporting log events as well, so that's good. What we will need to change is where it writes the logs, because we don't want it to create a logs folder in the middleware folder. So with our path.join, what we need to do is add in one extra spot here. I did not mean to hit return, there we go. And just go one directory up with the 2 dots. And now that we've got that, I'll copy it, and we need to add it to this path and this path as well. So when the logs directory is created, it is here where we already have our logs directory from the past rather than being created in the middleware directory. And now we need to take log events and import it into our server. So we'll scroll to the top and let's just put it underneath path. And we'll say const log events equals require dot slash middleware slash log events. And that completes that. We can save. And now we can use log events inside of our custom middleware logger. Let's put it right above the console log, and we have log events, and log events accepts two parameters. The first is the message, and the next is the file that it should write to or create. So inside for the message, we'll create a template literal, and I'm just going to paste this in so you can see the full message. It is the request method, and then we put a /t for tab, so we have a tab delimited log file, and then it's the request.headers.origin, which should be saying where the request is coming from, what website sent it to us, and then we should get what URL was requested. So say it's a get method and the request is coming from google.com and they are requesting our index page. After that, we need to tell it what file to create or write to, and we'll call this rec for request.log.txt. And now we should be good to go with our log events function. Let's go back to Chrome one more time, and let's go ahead and request our index page. It was requested. We see the requests here, and now we also see a request log has been created, and there are two requests. It was a GET request both times, and it was undefined because we're just running our Node server right here on our local host. And you can see what was requested as well, the / for index and the CSS style.css. And while this works, once again, let's look at the server.js. While this works, we're really importing a function to use inside of our anonymous function that is our logger that has the request, response, and next, as any middleware should. So we can clean this up a little bit. Let me go ahead and copy the anonymous function and everything inside of it. Control C to do that. And now we'll go back to the log events.js file, and here we can define another function just called logger. We'll set that equal to this anonymous function. And now logger can be our custom middleware that we export. So down here, instead of just exporting log events, which we'll use later or we wouldn't need to right now at all, I'll go ahead and put both inside of curly braces. Once again, we won't be using log events anymore inside of the server.js though. I'm just exporting this for use later when the need arises. So back at the server.js, instead of log events, we'll need curly braces now that there's two functions being exported, and we'll import logger from the log events file. And now with logger being imported and all of this logic inside of logger, we can just say app.use logger. And now this is much cleaner and should still work in the same way. So let's pull up Chrome once again and let's request the index. And we see the console logs still work. Let's look at the request log. And yes, we have two more requests in the request log. Once again, notice that it says undefined here is the origin because we're just using our local host server here as we pull this up. So let's make a request from another domain. I'll pull Chrome back up and now a new tab, and we'll go to Google. And on Google, let me go ahead and expand this and open up the DevTools with Control-Shift-I. Now that I have DevTools open, what I want to do is just call fetch, and I'm not really interested in the data. We're just going to fetch the destination, and let's see what we get. We get a CORS error. It says no access control allow origin. But let's go ahead and check our log file, and our log file does show google.com as the request origin. So you may have seen that error we got before from Google that showed the CORS error, and that stands for cross-origin resource sharing. And now this will lead us to third-party middleware, so we can install a dependency. I pressed Control-C to stop our dev server. I'm going to type npm I for install, and then CORS, C-O-R-S. And this should take just a second to install, and we'll be able to see the new dependency in our package JSON when this is finished. And it says it's finished already. Let's check the package JSON, and here we see CORS now added as a dependency. So let's go back to the server.js file. Okay, so we're in the server.js file here, and we need to go ahead and import CORS. So we define CORS and set it equal to require CORS. Once we have that, we need to apply the middleware. So we want it to come as soon as possible, but after the logger. So let's go ahead and apply CORS here. So we'll say app.use, and then we can just call CORS inside of the app.use. I'll go ahead and put a note here that CORS stands for cross-origin resource sharing. Let's save that and now go back and start our dev server again with npm run dev. And once the dev server has started, we'll pull up Google. It says it's good to go, it looks like. And let's go back to Google and let's make the same request. And now there's no CORS error. We get a promise pending, of course, from fetch, as we expect to there. But there's no error, and that's the main thing, is we can request data now from the google.com domain, and it doesn't create a CORS error. Let's minimize Chrome, and let's look at our request log again, and we once again see Google in there. So the domain, the request origin, did come from google.com. Okay, now let's go a little deeper into CORS. I don't want to make this a full tutorial on CORS because that can get pretty deep. However, CORS for cross-origin resource sharing is something that does need to be applied or you will get those errors. However, this just leaves it open. If you had an open to the public API, this would be fine. You're using CORS and everyone can use it. But for many applications, that's not really what you want. So let's create a whitelist, and we'll define it with a const, call it whitelist. And inside of that, we can have more than one domain. So let's say https / and then www.yoursite, whatever your .com is, whatever application, web application domain that will access this back-end Node server. That's where you want to put this domain here. But say you might also have a variation. Maybe you've got a variation without the www. Or maybe you're working on a local dev server and you launch from go live down here, click to run live server. Live server always runs on http:// 127.0.0.1, which is your computer, and then it gets a port like 5500, I believe, is the default. So maybe as you're building a React app, you're running your React app on this port or a different port on your local host, or you've used the IP address, which 127.0.0.1 is the same as having localhost there. Anything like that. So let's add those to the whitelist. And of course, we should add http://localhost, and we're using 3500 here today. Now, you would take these out after development, but of course you would leave in whatever domains should be able to access your data or your back-end server, and that would be your web application. Say your React application is at whatever domain, you would leave that in here. So we've created a list that is allowed to access the back end that CORS will not prevent. So now we need to create the function that will allow CORS to do this. And this is all contained within the CORS options. So that's what we'll call this, lowercase CORS and then camel case here with a capital O for options. And we set this equal to an options object. And the first property is origin, and origin can accept a function. So we have an anonymous function here, and it gets the origin, which is not the same as the origin right here necessarily. This is the origin coming from whoever requested it, say google.com, and then a callback function. And again, the two origins, a little confusing, but it's right from the documentation, so that's kind of how we need to do it. So we've got the origin there with the anonymous function, and we can say if the whitelist dot index of, and then we pass in the origin that is passed into the function. If that index is not equal to -1, in other words, if the domain is in the whitelist, then we're going to go ahead and let it pass. And then we can do the callback. And the first parameter in the callback is null, which is usually the error. So there's no error. And then we set the second one to true. And that just means that the origin will be sent back saying, yes, that's the same origin and it is allowed. And then we can have an else. And in the callback here, we have an error instead of null. And we create a new error and we can just say not allowed by cores. And so that is the message to go along with the error. Now that is the first property here in the cores options. We need to add one more. So we put a comma and then we put lowercase here, options, success, status. There it is. And we send a 200. And with that, we can save. And now that we've created the cores options, we need to pass those in right here. And notice we did not include Google in these cores options. Now Google could access without an error before we put in the options. Let's go back and make the same request from Google and see what happens now. We once again have a cores error. So let's go back and let's go ahead and change your site to google.com. Server is restarting. It looks like it's hanging up. Nope, it's going to go ahead and do it. There, we got it. And we go back to Google once again, and now it's in the whitelist. And we fetch, and there is no error. So we know our function is working as we expect it to. So when we come back and look, once again, you could change this to your domain, whatever your project, wherever it will be hosted. Say you've created it in React or Vue or even vanilla JavaScript, Svelte even, whatever you might create a front-end project with that will access this back-end, you want to put that domain in here, or maybe variations of. Again, remember, you might not have the www, or it might be optional, anything like that. So that allows you to put in domains that can access the routes, and otherwise cores will prevent them. So very useful third-party middleware. I want to go back to Chrome one more time and create that error one more time now that we've taken Google out of the whitelist. At least I thought we took Google out of the whitelist. Maybe I didn't save after we did that. That's exactly what happened. I hadn't saved the server.js file yet. Save here. NodeMon is restarting. It's taking it just a little bit. Maybe I need to go ahead and restart it once again. Every now and then I have to restart it manually. So npm run dev, get the NodeMon server up and running. I'll pull up Chrome. And let's see if we can get that error again. So yes, we've got the cores error here. Now let's look back in Visual Studio Code as well. And you can see we got the server still running, but we got this big error. And up here it says our message, error not allowed by cores, and this huge error here. Now we can handle errors in Express as well, but Express is already handling them. It has the built-in error handler by default, and that's what's happening when we throw this error. It is going there. However, let's go ahead and add a little custom error handling. So we scroll down to the very end. Remember, it's a full chain, so we want this after everything else, even after our 404 here. I'm going to paste this in, and you can see I'm using app.use once again. And then this is an anonymous function, and it doesn't just get the request, response, and next. It also receives an error parameter. And then we can log to the console the error stack if we want to, or just the message or whatever. We can go ahead and send a status 500 server error, and we can send the message to be displayed in the browser. So I'm going to save this, and we'll go back to Chrome, but we won't use Google anymore. Let's go ahead and just use the page that we have here, and I'll see if I can resize. There we go. I'm going to reload, and look, we got a not allowed by cores, even though we requested our index page. But our custom error did work, and it sent this to the browser. Now, why did we get that? Well, let's go ahead and look at the log. Here's our request log. You can see it's once again undefined. So undefined is a problem because that's not in the whitelist. So during development, you want to go ahead and make one modification to this function. Right here, after the -1, go ahead and put in the OR operator and then say no origin, essentially the exclamation mark origin, which would be the equivalent of undefined or false. And we save that, and now it should work. Now, after development, we probably want to remove that as well, just like we want to remove some of the development URLs that we have up here in the whitelist. So now let's go back to Chrome and see if we can reload our index page. Yes, and now everything is working as we expect it to. Now we can also tidy up that custom error handler. So let's scroll back down to it, and we see the function that we have here inside of app.use. I'm just going to copy that complete function, and now inside the middleware folder, let's create a new file, and let's call this error handler with a capital H there, so camel case, error handler.js. And now let's define our error handler and set it equal to, and we'll remove the function keyword, and we'll go ahead and put an arrow after this. And we've defined our error handler, but what we want to do that we're not doing yet is also create an error log. And this is where exporting the log events function that we left here comes in very handy. So now we need to import that here, not the logger, but the log events. So let's define log events inside of the curly braces, set that equal to require /log events. And now that we're importing log events, we can go ahead and use that in the function as well. So we'll call log events right here before we log to the console. And once again, this function gets a message first and then the name of the file that it needs to write to or create. So this will be a template literal, and I'm just going to paste in the values once again. Here, instead of anything from the request, such as the method like we were logging before, we're going to log the error name and the error message. And then we'll put a comma and go ahead and specify error log.txt as to where we want to write the error to. And we can save this, but we're not quite finished yet because we need to export this function. So we do module.exports, set this equal to error handler, and now save. And now we need to import error handler into our server. So let's scroll to the top of our server.js, and right underneath logger, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this down, and let's change this to error handler, and instead of log events, we're importing from middleware error handler, and save. Now we need to use the error handler where we previously had the larger function in this file. So it will be much cleaner. So let's go ahead and select this full function, delete that, and paste in error handler. And we can save. And we got an error, the app crashed. Let's see what we've got. So if I scroll up, it says app.use requires a middleware function. So something about the function probably didn't get imported correctly. Let's go ahead and scroll up to the top and look at our import statement. And oh yeah, we were using curly braces around logger because it was one of two functions from the file, but from the error handler, it's the only one. So let's go ahead and remove those curly braces around error handler and see how everything goes. It's restarting the server right now, and server running on port 3500. That part looks good. So with the server running, the best way I know to create an error would be to go ahead and remove this or no origin for now, and we'll go ahead and save, and then we'll try to reload the index page once again in Chrome. So it's starting the Node.js server, and now that it's running, let's reload, and we've got a not allowed by cores as we expected, an error in the console, and now we have an error log file over here in the file tree, and we can see we got our error not allowed by cores at 1827. So let's go ahead and look at the request log, and we should be able to line that up with what request happened here as well, and we can. So everything there is working as expected. So now that the error is logging, let's go ahead and put that or no origin statement back in for now, so we do not keep getting rejected by cores. We can go back and we can once again request the index page, and everything should work well when the server restarts. There we go. We've got the index page now. Okay, there's one more thing to do before we're finished today, and that is to compare app.use to app.all. And that's what we're going to do right here as we change up the 404 just a little bit. So with app.use, we could do something like this, app.use, and specify here at the end of the chain everything basically that came in from the slash, which would be the root. But app.use does not accept regex, and also app.use overall is more likely to be used for middleware, but app.all is used for routing, and this means it will apply to all HTTP methods. So it also does accept regex. So what we can do inside of this is just put an asterisk. It's at the very end of the page, so we can just say pretty much anything that made it here should get the 404 at this point. Let's go ahead and save the file and test it out. I'll pull up Chrome, and here we can put in the /Dave, and yes, there's no page that's Dave HTML, so that is a 404, although the request did log just fine. We can customize our 404 response just a little more. So let's start that out by just setting the response status, because we know it's going to be a 404 no matter what. After that, let's check the type. So we can say if the request accepts, and now we'll look at the type, the content type, and we can just say HTML here, and Express will translate that for us. And after that, then we'll put what happens, because if this will resolve till true or false here. So then we can go ahead and look at sending a file or something else inside of here. So what we'll do is say response.sendFile, and go ahead and send that 404. Now this is very much like what we were already doing, but now we can check for other types as well that might be accepted. So let's go ahead, I'll just copy all of this down and we'll change some of it. So Shift Alt and the down arrow copies everything. And now we'll say if the request accepts JSON. Well, then we don't want to send a file at all. So this will be entirely different. Let's get rid of all of this and say response.json, and we can put some JSON here inside of our response. And let's just say error, and over here we can say 404 not page, let's just say not found, which is essentially what a 404 is. And really what we're doing is creating a small waterfall effect here with the if, so we could make it another else if here, and then finally an else for our last possible outcome once I can spell else. And here we'll just respond, and we can set the type to text, just txt for the type actually, and then we can send, and inside the send we'll just put the same text that we have up here, 404 not found. So I'll paste that in, and that should work as well. So now I'll go ahead and remove these blank lines, and we will test out our 404 once again. I'll go to Chrome, and I've already got /Dave in the URL, so I'll just see if I can reload this 404 once the server restarts. And now it's restarted. I'll hit reload, and we got the 404, and it is the HTML. Now I would have to use Postman or something else to try out the JSON file, or possibly text as well. We would change the headers for that. And I'm just going to let you trust me that that will work for now instead of breaking out Postman or anything to just try out those two other routes. But overall, that is what you can do to customize a 404 with app.all, and I hope you understand at least a little bit of the difference between app.use, which is for middleware and does not accept regex, and app.all, which is more for routing, and it will apply to all HTTP methods at once. Give this video a like if it helped you get started with the Express framework for Node.js. And thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.